Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and ITY TV interview. I'm joined today by Dr. Torsten George, cybersecurity evangelist at self-healing intelligence security solutions provider Absolute Software. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it and really look forward to our discussion.
Me too. Thanks for taking the time. Now, Dr. George, could you please give us a high-level overview of the products and services you offer to customers in Australia and globally today, and what makes Absolute Software different and better?
Sure. As you mentioned, Absolute Software is the only provider of self-healing intelligence security solutions. So those solutions really help customers reduce complexities that are causing inefficiencies across their business and creating unnecessary risk exposure. So our mission is to enable a reliable, resilient work from anywhere experience, and we do this by ensuring maximum security and uncompromised productivity. And we deliver to our customers two different product lines. One is called Secure Endpoint, and that product line enables IT and security personnel to monitor and address laptop computers' problems, and it's also enabling laptops and their mission-critical application to self-heal. So this really helps with device lifecycle management. It helps strengthening a company's security posture, and it really allows them to maintain their compliance posture. The second product line, which was added to our product portfolio through an acquisition of a company called NetMotion, is called Secure Access. And this product portfolio really provides reliable network connectivity for users to gain secure access to critical resources, be it in the public cloud, be it in private data centers or on premises. And these products really allow users also to transition from traditional secure remote access technologies like enterprise VPN to a more modern approach of zero trust network access. And we do this without affecting the productivity or the admin controls. And so you might now ask, hey, well, I heard about other companies that do similar things, but so what makes Absolute really different? Our product lines and our individual product offerings are powered by the Absolute platform. And one of the essential platform components is our patented technology called persistence technology. And that technology is embedded in the firmware of more than 600 million devices and provides a secure, unbreakable, and always-on connection between the platform and the endpoint. And so once activated, this technology is fiercely resilient, and it's the only solution to survive attempts to disable it, even if the device is re-imaged, the hard drive is replaced, or the firmware is flashed. So no other technology can do this. And so we're also able to extend these self-healing capabilities beyond the firmware and extend that to mission-critical applications that are covered in what we call Application Resilience Catalog. So once taken on a policy, a customer can now monitor the health of their application and, if opted to do so, automatically repair and or reinstall the application if its integrity is deemed impeded. And this ensures that no matter what, be it common software decay, software collision, unintentional deletion, or malicious actions, the application will always function as intended. We also have patented network resilience technology that assures that a tunnel or network connection is resilient to any external factors, and we even help optimize audio and video transmission.
Well, that sounds very comprehensive and impressive. With cybersecurity never more vital in today's world, as you are clearly aware as a cybersecurity company, and zero trust having gone from a buzzword to an absolute game changing reality, in the midst of continuous digital transformation having accelerated at breakneck speed due to the pandemic, what is the cybersecurity situation as you see it today at a high level in late 2022?
In a single sentence, and to be very honest, I would say we face complete chaos, of which our cyber adversaries have taken major advantage of. We have to look at this. Overnight, remote work really evolved from a rarely used perk with separately managed security and compliance processes to really becoming the center of the working experience. And so it becomes really vital to gain full visibility and control over both endpoint and network connections. And as employees operate in this new work from anywhere environment, where they alternate between campus and off-campus networks, IT will really be challenged with inconsistent visibility and control. Back in the day, they could, in headquarters, walk over to the cubicle, look somebody over the shoulder. This is no longer applicable if you're working from home. And so it's really tough to understand what's going on. If I'm working from a hotel room like I do right now, how can my IT team know what is the Wi-Fi condition? How can they assist me? How can they determine if particular security protocols are being followed or not? And so that's one of the challenges that we're facing today. The other thing is really that with the changes that we saw, where now more people work from home, organizations aim to implement zero trust principles, as you outlined. And so the notion of trusted and untrusted networks no longer really exists. The perimeter defense that was established back in the days all diminished. And so high efficacy security controls need to be really uniformly applied regardless of where the user accesses data, be it the home, be it the hotel room, the airport, the headquarters. It doesn't matter. And so also mentioning the user, I think that's the third challenge that currently we're facing, is that user expect consistent and good quality experiences no matter where they are. And so, for example, they don't know when they use VPN, they don't want to constantly being kicked out, having to re-authenticate and enter their passwords. It's a very negative experience that really creates frictions. They don't want that. And so they really want their technology to work. And they don't care what happens in the back end. If they can reliably and consistently access the resources they need, they're happy. And so this really means for IT that they need a higher level of visibility when users work from home to really ensure a consistent experience regardless of the location. And so when we talk with organizations out there, we really tell them, if you can't solve this dilemma, you're really faced with increased disruptions, you're faced with higher risks, and more cost. And there are quite a few examples out there. For instance, on average, 2 hours per week of productive time is currently lost per employee due to interruptions, be it their network, be it their endpoint. And then when it comes to really helping those employees, 69% of organizations really found it more difficult to fix IT issues in this new work from anywhere environment. And then security-wise, we have seen an uptick in the average cost of a corporate data breach. It's now at $4.24 million in 2022. So really companies have to step back, have to kind of rethink their long-term strategy when it comes to IT and security. And when we engage with prospects, a lot of time what we hear from them as what they see as important components, it's really they want to have always on visibility and control, both for endpoint and network and across the network. They want to ensure that the endpoint stays resilient, that it holds up to any external factors so that their employees are productive. And then definitely they want to also have a consistent end user experience so that there are no frictions, that there's no interference, that their employees are having a positive experience and they want to stay on to work with this company. And then last but not least, because I wouldn't be able to talk with you right now, it's not just core about the endpoint, but also about secure and reliable access and making sure that I do this in a safe fashion, but also at the same time that I don't have any network interruptions.
Now, one of the services that you offer is called Digital Experience Monitoring, and we just spoke about that just before. So what is a bit of extra detail about that, and why is it more important than ever?
Yeah, so to be accurate, the product that delivers digital experience monitoring capabilities when it comes to assuring secure access is called Insights for Networks, and we have similar capabilities available for endpoints. There, obviously, we call it Insights for Endpoints. But you have to really think about, many organizations have turned to digital experience monitoring tools to really help them identify technology performance issues and really align their application performance to support their business objectives. And in fact, Gartner recently published a report, and they predict that by 2026, at least 60% of organizations will use some type of digital experience monitoring to measure application services and endpoint performance from the end user's viewpoint. And that's up from 20% in 2021. So when it comes to digital experience monitoring technologies, it's really about looking at the availability, the performance, and the quality of an end user or their digital agent experiences when using a device or an application. And this really allows IT practitioners to understand any type of problems from a user perspective. And obviously, if I know something is wrong, I can promptly resolve particular issues and I can ensure really uncompromised productivity. And so, in addition to monitoring, it also empowers IT teams to enforce service level agreements by making it really easy to analyze how third party solutions perform. For instance, if you have an organization that subscribed to a carrier plan for their employees, so you're handing out mobile phones to your employees and you're paying for that, you want to make sure that the experience, that the accessibility is always given, that you're not paying for nothing. And so these tools can help with that too. And then it's often really a complementary solution. So you might have existing application performance monitoring or network performance monitoring tools, but it really augments these and together really provides an end-to-end picture. And it really gives insights into the end user experience that really is significant today in this work from anywhere environment.
So, Dr. George, as we've just seen in Australia with the Optus hack attack, the response from the company is incredibly important. So, in the world of ransomware, why is the response more important than the importance of protection?
Yeah, so reality is simply that, well, organizations might be concerned about the time to recover from a ransomware attack. When you really look at where they put their money, uh, they're spending a lot in focusing on getting new prevention tools in there. And they might do some paper exercises when it comes to their recovery efforts. But it's really, they're not planning in detail the worst case scenario, meaning falling victim to an attack.
Mm.
And numbers really speak for themselves. In 2021, 54% of all ransomware attacks were successful despite the preventive measures in place. And if this is the case, if this is the reality, you really have to take a step back and say, well, obviously going forward, I need to increase my ransomware preparedness and really ensure that the tools needed for my remediation, eradication, or recovery efforts are not just in place, but I can also make sure that they're functioning as expected. And this holds, again, very true for the recovery of endpoints, which, as I mentioned earlier, represents an essential tool nowadays for remote workers to conduct their assigned business task in this new work environment. We have seen where customers could not recover those endpoints for months. And during that time, their employees could simply not operate and contribute to the business's success.
Well, this leads then to the rather amazing sounding self-healing cybersecurity system that Absolute Software offers. I mean, most people would sort of have imagined that their cybersecurity programs are, find the threat and automatically deal with it and get rid of it. But you're talking about something more fundamental. I mean, this is no longer a pipe dream, but it's a reality with Absolute Software, right?
It is. So really self-healing cybersecurity systems represent a major security and IT productivity advancement. Really, it allows organizations to streamline the management and protection of today's highly distributed infrastructures. However, you have to be aware that not all self-healing cybersecurity systems are built really equally. For example, any enterprise endpoint can only be dependable if it functions as intended and without disruption. And so an employee can intentionally or unintentionally undermine their endpoint by installing unsupported third-party application that suddenly lead to collision and something doesn't work any longer, or they can become the victim of a phishing attack. And there are plenty of malicious threat actors also exploiting the human errors to disable existing security applications on enterprise devices. So now, to remediate against such compromises, a self-healing solution would ensure that vital applications are monitored for tampering, degradation, and failure. And there are different flavors of self-healing out there. There are a lot of independent software vendors, for instance, that use a method of kernel drivers to harden their application, which makes it more difficult to get removed from the device. But that approach lacks the self-healing, the automation capability to go back to the original state where everything worked. And so really here what we're looking for is that automation can be deployed to repair and even reinstall the problematic or missing application. And so you can see the different flavors of self-healing. And when you talk with industry analysts, for instance, Forrester, they just wrote in a report of the future of endpoint management, they clearly said there are different levels available at the application layer, at the operating system, and even within firmware. And for them, firmware-based tools that ship embedded within the device, they believe it will prove the most essential because it will ensure that everything running on the device itself works correctly, be it an endpoint agent, VPNs, any software that you might install. And so due to this privileged position on the device, the technology remains persistent even if administrators re-imaging the endpoint or replacing the hard drive. And so in the future, organization, when they look at self-healing technologies, they should really ask their vendors to demonstrate their persistence and self-healing capabilities before they make a final purchase decision. Because again, there are different flavors out there. Some of them do specific things, but not all of them, and others are all encompassing. So it's really important to kind of test that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to zero trust, which we've mentioned already. In a world where the new paradigm is to work from anywhere, as we all know, trust is, or zero trust is no longer a but. Let me just say that again. So, absolutely. Now, back to zero trust, which we mentioned already. In a world where the new paradigm is to work from anywhere, as we all know, zero trust is no longer a buzzword, but a tangible measure that delivers vastly improved security. So can you please tell us about how Absolute Software approaches and implements zero trust?
Sure. So zero trust, just to remember or recall for our audience, is a framework or mindset that really acknowledges that in today's dynamic threat landscape, organization can no longer trust that the good guys are within their corporate borders while the threat actors or bad guys are operating outside these virtual walls. Today's mantra, therefore, is never trust, always verify. And so what does that really mean for organization and their day-to-day operations? Well, they need to deny access by default. They need to trust no one until proven otherwise, and they need to look far beyond just credentials for access. We all rely on these passwords, but you have to understand, for instance, machines are nowadays also accessing critical information, and so we have to include that into our consideration. And we should not grant access in the morning and then allow that to happen for the entire day. We should continuously assess any type of access for its risk and make individual decisions. And so Absolute really helps establish these zero trust principles from firmware boot to network edge as we continuously really monitor the security posture of endpoints. We look at what is the network doing? What are you as a user doing on the network? Are you exposed potentially to any unauthorized content or harmful content? And then we also account for a multitude of factors when granting access. So it's no longer just the password and username. We're decoupling from that and really look at things of geolocation, of time of day, what type of application are you trying to gain access for? And so taking all of these steps into account, we really help minimize an organization's risk exposure.
As you're explaining all of this to me and the zero trust and the self healing, I'm reminded that a few years ago, I think before the pandemic, I was reading about these security researchers that had discovered that they themselves had been under attack, which is no surprise, I guess, for security researchers. But the bad guys had infected their BIOS with some sort of malware that was almost impossible to detect and impossible to get rid of. And then there was some sort of high frequency communication happening between computers and devices that traditional security software couldn't deal with, and it was even able to penetrate air gap machines. Now, that was a few years ago, so I'm guessing the security companies are well aware of this. But is this something that Absolute Software can defend and protect against?
Yeah, I think you have a very good point here. When you read the news headlines around data breaches, be it Optus, Telus, Telstra, you call it. A lot of times the media focuses in on where data was exfiltrated from. They never really look at how did the hacker get to that point, correct? They're not snapping their finger and show up on the server.
Mm.
They start early in the cyber attack chain, and often in 68% of the cases, they start at an endpoint. And so it's very natural then to also see what are the security mechanisms and what are my attack vectors. And firmware of endpoints has become one of the major attack vectors. And unfortunately, nobody writes about it in the media, but it's happening almost on a daily basis. And so we're obviously in a very unique position where our technology is embedded into the firmware. So we're obviously monitoring, are there any changes to the firmware itself? And we're also helping with some of our system manufacturing partners like Lenovo to, in a secure fashion, change the admin password for the firmware. So we have particular mechanism in place that really minimize the risk exposure for that attack vector.
And just for clarity for people watching, when I talk about the BIOS and you talk about the firmware, we're basically talking about the same thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Now, I know that talking about customers is something that you don't always do in the world of cybersecurity, but are there customers in Australia and globally that you can talk about, or the industries that they're in, and some success stories worth sharing?
Sure, as you can imagine, based on the description of our product portfolio, our solutions help customers across many verticals, ranging from finance, governments, law enforcement, public safety, healthcare, energy and utilities, and retail to transportation. So it's tough to grab one particular case study, but because we talked about ransomware, I think I have a great story to share. It's about a national retailer, thousands of outlets across the country, and they unfortunately fell victim to a ransomware attack. So the attacker initially compromised the corporate environment via compromised credentials, started on endpoints, run reconnaissance, which is very typical. It's part of standard procedures of attackers. And as part of their reconnaissance, they really were interested in finding out what are security controls, for instance, on endpoints, what are the tools that are being used to recover those devices in case they would be exposed to ransomware. And once they figured that out, they basically disabled all of these tools and security applications, and only then they dropped the ransomware. And so it really made the recovery effort extremely tough. Obviously, when it comes to ransomware recovery, in the first step, you're trying to recover your critical infrastructure, and that's typically your Active Directory. Then the next step, you move on to business applications. And one of the final phases, you might finally try to recover your endpoints. And in that particular case, it took them weeks to get to the point where they tried to recover the endpoints for their employees. And they played around it for weeks, and then they suddenly knocked on our door and said, hey, we use your product more on a life cycle management basis, but obviously your capabilities lend itself for a ransomware recovery. Can you help us? And so we were able, because we have that always on connection to the endpoint, we were able to gain control over the endpoint, which allowed us, despite the devices being infected, to re-image the devices. Once we re-imaged the devices, we were able to reload the necessary critical security application to reestablish the cyber hygiene that is needed. And we were also able to turn back on all these management tools that are required to push out applications, to do vulnerability management, patch management. So all of that happened within a few hours. And so instead of spending further weeks on trying to figure out how to break that devil's cycle, with our help, they were able to basically within hours get a hold of the problem, and then within a couple of days really make those endpoints operational again and empower the employees to go back to work. And that's just showing you the power of persistence and resilience capabilities that we bring to the table.
Sure. And just on that, I mean, it sounds like they were a customer of yours, but weren't using the entire suite of protections. I mean, it's often the case that, when people use their smartphones or the technology, they know how to use a certain amount, but there's so many other things that smartphone or that software suite or that whatever it is can do. And if you're unaware of it, you're just not using it. So, I mean, how is it in a nutshell that they were your customer, but they didn't know they could do this, and it must have been such a light of a shining light of enlightenment that they realized, hey, we have this, we should be using it, and they saw a solution in hours that had taken them weeks to stumble around and not get fixed.
So our original buyer in this account was really the IT team, and not necessarily the security team, but obviously the security team is in charge on helping with ransomware recovery. And so when they encountered all of these issues, they obviously engaged with the IT team, and they basically, hey, we have this tool that we're using, which we believe can be perfect to help us in the situation. And so for us, it was good learnings also. We started now with so-called tech talks. These are webinars where we expose our customers to really the broader capabilities. They might have bought it for a particular use case, and we want to really make them aware that they really understand how our solution can help for many other use cases.
So that leads me into the next question, which is, each customer is different, but what is a typical onboarding process for a customer? And obviously, it now includes this, seminar or workshop or onboarding, conference, so that they realize that, hey, you bought it for this, but actually you get all this with it, or if you upgrade your license, you can have all this too. And here's some examples like the one you gave before of where it really made a difference and saved customers bacon when they didn't know that it was there. It could have saved them much, much earlier.
Definitely. So upon signing a contract with us, we typically have a kickoff call within the first 2 weeks in which the customer is meeting their assigned team members. And that ranges from their account manager, who has been dealing with them probably for quite a few months. And now they're also being introduced to the support team, to the customer experience team. We have dedicated customer success managers that are really looking after the accounts. And so the onboarding process itself entails training, it entails design, it entails testing, deployment, and then from there on, continuous optimization. There are always best practices that we can take away from all the 18,000 plus customers that we're serving and really pass that back on to individual customers. And then this whole thing is augmented by continuous technical support and frequent customer success management. And as part of customer success, we run kind of quarterly webinars where we talk about our product roadmap and we expose them to new capabilities that just got released. And then we also have so-called tech talks that I mentioned where we focus on particular use cases to demonstrate how our solution really help solve customers' issues.
Now, on a global basis, October, as we're recording this, is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's also Mental Health Awareness Month. Now, there's a not for profit organisation in Australia called CyberMinds with a Z.org, which launched earlier this year and has now launched into the US and wants to launch into the Five Eyes in Europe to promote mental well-being for cybersecurity professionals, which makes me wonder, how does Absolute Software approach these two important areas?
I'm very proud to work for Absolute because I consider us a champion for cybersecurity awareness. So we're engaging with our PR agencies on a worldwide basis to drive awareness campaigns. And that doesn't end in October. We do that on an ongoing basis. And it's about educating customers and prospects alike on what are the best practices that they can apply to really strengthen their cyber resilience. And then at the same time, I have to say, again, very proud, Absolute offers its own employees access to complementary wellness services to really ensure their mental health and proper work-life balance. So there are classes that you can attend, and it's really up to you which one you choose. They go from meditation, breathing techniques. So there's a wealth of really classes that you can choose from, and it really helps deal with nowadays a quite stressful work situation. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, what you want to prevent is burnout, so that you don't lose your, hard-won employees that you've trained and that worked on incredible, scenarios and experiences, and you'd love them to continue working for you for as long as possible. These days, it's not about talent acquisition, but talent retention. And happy customers means you're going to have, happy staff means happy customers too. So I'm glad to hear you're
Yep.
doing that. So, what else should we know about Absolute Software that we haven't already spoken about?
Probably just to reiterate, at the core of what Absolute stands for is persistence, which means unbreakable connection, be it to an endpoint or be it for your network connection, as well as resilience, which equals self-healing. We believe these are the two essential ingredients needed to enable a reliable work from anywhere experience to really ensure that maximum level of security and uncompromised productivity.
And Dr. George, how do you see Absolute Software evolving over the next couple of years?
So we believe in the power of harvesting data, which allows our customers to really gain insights that help them to shift from a reactive to a more of a proactive mode when it comes to ensuring IT productivity and security. So over the next few years, we envision with the help of artificial intelligence and machine learning technology to further advance our capabilities, where we can basically identify patterns and provide early warning indicators so that either if the customer chooses to do it in a manual fashion, that they can address the problem before it really occurs, or even fully automate the remediation actions. And we nowadays already collect hundreds of data points across endpoint, network, and applications. And we expect to build out the amount of data that we're ingesting and then serving up to our customers over the next few years.
And just to look into the crystal ball even further, I mean, the 2030s starts in 8 years, so maybe 7 years and a few months. And, the metaverse is the big buzzword. And you can imagine people peering into their augmented reality and extended reality glasses and working in these cyber worlds, doing stuff that we saw Keanu Reeves doing in Johnny Mnemonic, accessing all of these various things in the visual cyberspace. So, are you already working in that area, and are you already dreaming up how you might be protecting the chips that will surely be in people's brains by then, which will be another vector of attack that will try and ransomware human beings and put them into a digital coma?
Yeah, I think the sad part of the story, if we're really realistic today or in the future, I believe that organization will always be at a disadvantage and play catch up with their cyber adversaries. We're still a little bit behind when it comes to sharing of threat information. Our adversaries, they have the dark web forums where they exchange information. They even offer services, correct? When we talk about
Yeah.
ransomware, there's ransomware as a service. I can just submit a form where I say, I want to attack this company, and here's what I'm paying you for it, and here's the data I want to get exfiltrated, and then somebody else is doing that on my behalf. So when I look in the future, I think that organizations are still behind the curve a little bit. However, the difference maker will be those organizations that can really ensure that they can remain resilient to these type of attacks. They will stand out. There's no 100% protection. And so for organizations that are really more focused on making their environment, their systems resilient to external factors, I think they will have a higher probability to successfully maneuver through these tough times.
Sure. Now we're down to the last three questions. So the third last one is if you could to ask if you could please tell us a bit about your history in the world of tech and what a typical day in the life of is for you as a cybersecurity evangelist and executive.
Sure. So I've been part of the global IT security community for more than 27 years and regularly provide commentary and publish articles on data breaches, insider threats, compliance frameworks, IT security best practices, you name it. I even co-authored a book on zero trust privilege for dummies. And I sit on an advisory board of a company called NOPSEC. They're a vulnerability risk management software vendor. And so I've seen a lot, and my typical day starts at 4:45 in the morning. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. And one of the first things after stepping out of the shower is to look at the latest news, specifically anything related, obviously, to cybersecurity. Because I know our corporate marketing or corporate communications team will, a few hours later, when they wake up, they will come to me and ask for commentary. And so that's part of my day-to-day routine. But then, obviously, otherwise, I'm blessed to manage a very talented group of individuals. So helping them to grow in their career, mentor them, is very important to me. I'm writing a lot. I create a lot of content to really educate prospects and customers out in the market because I really see myself more as an evangelist rather than an executive. And so my goal is really to help customers and prospects to strengthen their cybersecurity posture. And the story, the success story I shared with you, if you have this as an experience where you can see that you had a major impact, where you really saved them a lot of cost. We have other examples where it's about life or death, because if you ensure a reliable network connection and you think about a sector like EMTs, where they come out, that there's a car accident, and they now have to communicate ahead to the hospital that they need a trauma team to stand by as soon as the patient comes in. They rely on that connectivity. They rely on the application that they're using to communicate. And so all of these stories, when you are involved in that, it really is very rewarding because you really see that you have an impact on individuals, on organizations, and then nationwide on really our cyber posture.
So my second last question is to ask if you could please share some of the best advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today.
Well, it wasn't probably a verbal advice, but I observed my dad, who really taught me that hard work pays off over time. And so I wouldn't be where I am today if I wouldn't be for my work ethics that I inherited from him. And also at the same time being able to being open-minded. And when you start a new job, for instance, not go in there and say, this is how I have done it in the past, and this is how it needs to be done in the future. But I'm a big believer in lifelong learning, and I can learn from my teammates. I can constantly go to classes, courses, and especially in cybersecurity, every day there's a new development, there's an iteration of the threats, and so you have to be on top of your game there.
So, what is your final message to ITY viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
So for me, it's really important to convey that to build a successful cybersecurity strategy, you must think like an attacker and really understand what tactics, processes, and procedures they're using to exploit any vulnerabilities. And when you consider our industry will spend $172 billion for IT and security tools this year alone. But then every day we wake up and we hear about the next big data breach. Something is wrong in that equation. And it really proves that we might not spend the money in the right areas. And that's really based on the fact that often we're not thinking like attackers. If we would know what are their primary attack vectors, and we would focus in on these areas, we would be far more successful. So when it comes to fundamentals for our audience, they should know their assets. If you don't know your assets, you can't protect them, correct? You should not trust credentials, as they can easily be compromised. 81% of today's data breaches are based on the fact that there's either weak or compromised credentials that allowed the attacker to gain access into the organization. And then another thing is really to focus on the front end of the cyber attack, not on the back end, correct? Yeah, they will potentially end up at your server and exfiltrate data. But if you break that attack chain early on, they wouldn't even get there. So focus on your endpoints. They're often the beachhead. 68% of organizations have experienced data breaches that originated at the endpoint. And obviously, because the endpoint is just a dumb piece of hardware, also focus on network security and really secure access, and really focus in on these 3-4 areas. And I think you can sleep better at night.
Well, Dr. Torsten George, cybersecurity evangelist at self-healing intelligent security solutions provider Absolute Software. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you very much for your time. I do hope we can talk again in the future, and best of luck.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.